Good afternoon, I think. Yeah, just about afternoon. Welcome to Being a Man. I'm out in the garage gym, just waiting for the pre-workout to kick in. And I thought now would be a good time to make a video I've been meaning to do for a while. About one of the reasons why I've got a garage gym. And something that I feel quite strongly about, having been through it. So I had quite a bit of trouble last year with my own mental health. Several things led up to that, and eventually led to me asking for help, something I thought I'd never have to do, something I've never had to really do before. And I know that a lot of people are in the same position and probably felt the same way as I did about it. And I want to do something to try and dispel that and hopefully encourage more people to ask for help. So I'm a paramedic, so of course in my job we see things and we do things that are quite not nice, and those sorts of things don't normally bother me. Might come across as callous to people that aren't in this job, but it's something that you learn to accept as a part of life and part of the job. In accepting those things, you tend to still store them. They still cause you stress, even if they don't cause you upset. And I've had a fair few jobs that cause quite a bit of stress, which I'm not going to talk about, don't worry. So in my first year or so of being a paramedic, as I say, I went to a few of these jobs that were quite difficult to deal with, and I processed that and I moved on. And then over a short period of time I went to 3 or 4 jobs that were quite horrible, and were quite stressful. And with one of those jobs in particular, I didn't feel that I was supported very well in the aftermath. And in bringing that up and creating a bit of understanding with that, it was a very stressful time. I just felt that I was coming up against brick walls, and that nothing was really being done, and it felt like nobody really cared about my welfare and indeed the welfare of my crewmate that I was working with at the time. And that's actually upset me more. That caused me a great deal more stress than the actual job. The job that I'm thinking of in particular really didn't bother me. It's the kind of job that I got into this job to do. Unfortunately it didn't go how we wanted, but that's what happens quite often. But it was the aftermath and the poor handling that really got to me. Now through all this, my best friend was very, very ill. So I had that going on in the background as well. So everything that happened at work, all the little upsets with things not going how I expected, little upsets at home, tantrums, bills that we were struggling to pay, things like that, walking behind somebody who was slow in the supermarket, all these little things were building on top of the big problem, which was my best friend being so unwell. Now when we come up to this big job that wasn't very well looked after, this was coming up to the time where he was in a hospice, and he'd gone there for just to be looked after. It wasn't for any more than that. It was just to try and get on top of some of his medications that they were struggling to do at home, and the plan always was that he was going to go there for a couple of weeks, get things sorted out, and then he was going to go home again. And in fact, after a few weeks, he had packed his bags and plans were being made to go and pick him up. Until one night I got home from work and got a phone call from his wife telling me to get there. And he died that night. His whole family were around him. I was lucky enough to be there as well. Now, the next morning I was due to work and I'd been out very late that night, to the point that really the next day I needed to not go to work. But I felt at the time, with the troubles I'd had at work, I mean there's things I haven't mentioned. I've had quite a bit of a rocky start to my career. I felt that if I called in to say I need the day off, that if there was a reason that I couldn't have the day off, which was a chance because he wasn't family, so it doesn't come under the policy of compassionate leave where I could automatically have the day off. I didn't have any holiday available that I could take or anything like that. I felt if I called in and they were awkward about it, that I was likely to say or do something really stupid. My mindset was such that I would have, I don't know what I'd have done. So rather than risk getting myself into trouble, or rather than risk getting even more upset, I went into work. It was only a short day, but I went into work and shouldn't have done. We got through that okay. Everything went fine that day. We actually didn't do too much work, so it wasn't too bad. And over time, I deteriorated quite badly. And the thing is, I didn't notice. I started coming home from work thinking, I've just spent that entire day chewing my crewmate's ear off, ranting about absolutely anything and everything that happens, putting blame on everything, and just getting really upset at the most minor things. And after a few weeks I started to notice this, but not enough to do anything about it. And then I started coming down with something. Wasn't really sure what it was. I just had just some issues with my breathing. It started to feel like I had like a rod of ice down in my chest, and it would sort of radiate up through my throat, and I would just get short of breath for a little while, and it would pass. And this happened, and I said to my wife, I think I'm coming down with something, maybe that's why I'm so tired. And after about the third or fourth time that I mentioned this to her, she looked at me and she said, "Are you sure you're not having a panic attack?" And with that, everything clicked into place. I wasn't panicking, I wasn't anxious about anything, but I was having those symptoms. They're symptoms of stress. I realised I was so tired, so snappy, I had no patience with anybody, particularly the kids and my wife, particularly my managers and the people that were involved in running my day-to-day job. And the more I thought about it, the more I realised how unwell I was. And I finally asked for help. Thankfully, through my work, we have access to a service for anything really. If you're physically injured, if you need a bit of physiotherapy, if you're mentally unwell, financially struggling, things like that, we have a service that can at least signpost us to the right help. And in this case, I very quickly got a call back from this service to say what's going on. And I had a very frank discussion over the phone with the guy to say this is what's going on. I'm convinced that I'm having physical symptoms of stress, even though I'm not getting the classic sort of anxiety attack. And he said, I totally agree with you. And he referred me on to another service which was for mental health counselling. Now they got back to me again really quickly to say you've got a choice of 2 therapists in 2 different places. I chose the one closest to me. And while I'd been waiting for this, I'd been talking to a couple of my colleagues who said, oh yeah, I've been through that. There's a really nice counsellor at this place. So because they were closest, and because I had a couple of recommendations, I went with this person. And got my first appointment the next week, which I was really surprised at. So I went into this session. Beforehand, she'd sent me a load of forms, like assessment forms to fill out, just quizzes to get an idea of my baseline. And I went in and she scored it, and she was really quite concerned at how badly I'd scored. And I filled it out just thinking, oh yeah, this is how I am day to day, seems fairly normal. And she says, no, you've scored really badly. And so we started to get into it. And obviously the first question is, so what's been going on? How can I help you? And I told her basically the story I've just told you, but in a bit more detail. And when I got to the part about my friend dying, I absolutely lost it. I don't know where it came from, but we didn't talk for about 20 minutes. I just completely lost it. It all came out. And I think that was the turning point. Everything came out that I'd not wanted to talk about, that I'd not been able to talk about because it was too difficult. The people around me that of course there are always people that say you can tell me anything, and quite often those are the people that you can't, because you don't want them to know what's going on in your head. I think if somebody knows what's going on in your head all of the time and they're with you all the time, I think it makes it even harder, just because there are times where you want to sit there and just be in your own head without having somebody knowing what you're doing and what you're thinking. One of the things actually that came up during my counselling is, if you're thinking something bad, you need to ask yourself why you're thinking it, whether it's helpful to you, and if not, you need to stop thinking it, which sounds daft, but you can, when you analyse it like that, you can just move on. But there are times where actually you want to feel sad and you want to remember those things, and that's fine. So I say that first session was the turning point, that point where I let it all out. And I really mean it. That first session completely changed my life. I was immediately better. I was immediately more resilient. I wasn't perfect. I was still struggling. But I had 5 or 6 sessions in the end. And by the end of those, all of the superfluous stuff that didn't really matter, I'd gotten rid of. All the things like I don't get on with this person at work, and I don't like this thing that we have to use. I was stressed about those things because of the big thing. So once I talked all those through and realised that they were a waste of time worrying about, that left me with just the big problem. Now, we didn't fix that, and we never set out to, and counselling won't do that. There is nothing, if you've got something like this, if you've got a big thing that's causing you problems, you're not going to fix it, and I don't think you want to. What it will do is give you the means to cope with it and the means to get you through those bad days. A really good analogy that I heard was that grief is like being lost at sea in a storm. At first the waves come and they push you down and you can't breathe, and they just keep pushing you down. Every time you come up for air you get pushed down again. As time goes by, and particularly with counselling to help you through, the waves might be just as big, but they'll be less often, and you'll be a better swimmer. So it'll be easier to deal with. And my favourite analogy is a bucket. So I've got my bucket. There's only so much room in my bucket, so if I start filling it up with things like a bill that I've struggled to pay, an injury, a fallout with somebody at work, daft stuff. Seems daft now. At the time they'll feel like an inconvenience, so they go in your bucket. Eventually, if you fill it with enough of those things, yes, things will start to spill out, and they spill out as stress, anxiety, anger, intolerance, impatience, and all those things. If you chuck something big in there, like a death, somebody being really ill, anything big, then you've got less room. So then the little things, every little thing spills out. Every little thing, if you bump into somebody at work, if you stub your toe on the coffee table, everything will come out. And you just lose your temper at anything. So the thing to do, and what's important, is to empty your bucket frequently. And there are ways of doing that. Counselling, exercise. Big thing for me was exercise. That's why one of the big reasons I've got a gym. Your dog, he's lying in the corner. A day out with the family, anything that helps. A day out alone, just go and sit somewhere quiet and think, scream, shout, cry. Anything that empties your bucket, so that the next time something big comes along, you've got some space in the bucket. So I know it's a bit of a ramble. Hadn't really planned it because I didn't know how to plan this video. I just thought I'd go with it. Yes, it's been difficult, but the whole point is that I want people to realise that getting the help is easy. The first step of asking for the help is the hard bit. Once you've done that, it's plain sailing. It's really, really easy. It's not as scary as you think. I never believed in talking therapy, but now I recommend everybody would go through talking therapy, whether they feel that they need it or not. If I can offer any more advice or words of encouragement, please drop me a message or drop me a comment. But other than that, I hope that's been helpful. Pre-workout's kicked in.